Good evening, sir.
Yo, yo. This is episode 73 of the Beef and Bitcoin podcast with your host, Brett and CH. Today's topics: the importance of running a node. Looks like there's trouble in paradise over in Bcash land, and they are learning the very valuable lesson of why it is so important to run your own full node. So we'll touch on that. Just as we discussed in episode 46, Layer 1 finally started mining in West Texas. So mining in America is back. It is up and running, so we'll go through some of that. They have some pretty lofty goals for the next couple of years. So I think it's important to touch on that. And last but not least, it looks like Bitcoin or cryptocurrency debit cards are back in the news again. This is something we've seen historically over the last couple of years. Typically becomes big news. People are going to spend their cryptocurrencies, and then it ends up fizzling out because what did we say before we were recording? Bear markets are a bitch, and just what a way to put a damper on things. Not to mention the tax implications in certain jurisdictions. So we'll touch on that because I think this story is a little bit more interesting than some of the other ones have been previously. But yeah, man, here we go. We're going into the weekend.
It is the weekend. It's Saturday night, and all I know is things are not getting better with the coronavirus. I know that has nothing to do with the topics today, but things are just going south so fast right now. It's just like I think we recorded last night, like the number of cases in Italy and South Korea have just been jumping a lot, and same with Iran. Iran has a lot of deaths too, which makes you wonder when they're canceling like all events for like a week. Makes you wonder how many are really infected there. I think there's quite a few, considering they're a communist regime or more totalitarian.
Yeah, it can get messy pretty fast. Even just since we last recorded, it seems like more news is popping up. But I guess that's why weekends are so much fun, because you never know what's going to happen on Monday, and we probably say that every week. That
we say it every weekend.
Monday's coming around the corner, and you never know what the next week's going to bring. So we'll stay tuned for that. I'm sure we're going to touch on that next week when we record. But yeah, I guess to jump in, the importance of running a node. So we typically don't talk about running a node all that much on this podcast, and we probably should, because it is important. And I know not everybody wants to take the time to learn how to run a node or figure out how they're going to connect their full node to their wallets or various software, or maybe they're using a coin join software and they want to use their own full node so that they're not leaking any data to anybody. But Bitcoiners have really pushed on this, and you hear Trace Mayer talk about this if you ever watch some of Trace's interviews or his talks, where he says, you're a first-class Bitcoin citizen. They hold their own keys and they run their own node, because the whole point is to validate your own transactions. Now, we had mentioned the Bitcoin Cash miner tax of 12.5% that someone had proposed. That looks like, I don't even know if there was any back and forth, that it was just going to go through on a different implementation or something like that. And all of the sudden, as you can see on the screen here, if you're watching this on YouTube, you have basically a picture with 4 tweets on it from Gavin Andreessen, Peter Rizun, Sal the Argorist, basically saying running a Bitcoin Cash node, no miner tax. So all of a sudden, you have a big flip of the script from the bcashers, who pretty much have been pushing the narrative of don't run your own full node. There's no need to run a node or validate your own transactions. Nobody's ever going to do that. And now all of a sudden they realize that miners don't control Bitcoin software, or in this case, Bitcoin Cash, and that if you run your own node, you can opt out of the miner tax, because you're not going to be forced to use a different version of the software where there's a tax, effectively, where you have to pay the tax. You don't have a choice. And not to rant on and on about it, but it is important, because when you think about Bitcoin acting like a money, it's the only money that anybody's been able to use where you can verify the supply on your own. You don't have to trust anybody. And that's just so objectively different from other things that have been used as money. Well, that's why Ron Paul was always trying to audit the Fed, and they told him to fuck off, because
every time,
right? Like, and his whole, I think Ron knew that would never happen, but he said it anyway, because he was trying to prove a point. Like, you guys have inflated the currency so much, when just look at asset prices, look at just consumer good prices of things just going up.
But look at my 401k.
Right,
It's
exactly.
like-
So it's just so fascinating that you can use something as money and validate the total supply. It really just is fascinating when I take a big step back and think about that kind of stuff. And it's funny because you're going to see a lot of bcashers who are trying to sync their own node and run their own node so they don't have to pay the miner tax, and they might be upset with this is one of the reasons why the block size is so important, and this was the whole point of the Bitcoin Cash fork, right? They wanted to raise the block size so they could squeeze more transactions into the block, and the Bitcoiners were saying, "Oh, that's probably not that good of an idea because if you raise the block size, all of a sudden the size of the chain gets so large." That's why Ethereum's chain size is like, I want to say, in the terabytes, like above 5 terabytes, and it's almost impossible to sync the full node like from scratch without your computer going up in flames. And that just gets back to decentralization, right? If you can't spin up a node in a relatively quick amount of time without using a ton of bandwidth so in other words, if the cost of running a full node is low and low enough, it can there's a higher probability of it being more decentralized, so people run them globally. But not if you need a fucking server farm and warehouses to run your own full node. It's just no one's ever going to do that, and that's where you lead to the centralization issue. So I don't know. This was too funny to just this meme that's up right now. If you're watching on YouTube, I don't know. I just find the whole thing hysterical. So what do you think about this? Do you think this action in particular of bcashers pushing because they don't want to agree with a change that other people want, do you think this starts to improve the narrative? Does it? Well, maybe they fork or something like that, but I think it improves the narrative, and more people will understand that miners don't control Bitcoin. People who run nodes validate transactions, and they control it, right? Because you run your own software, and that more people will start to understand why it's important to keep the chain size small. I think it helps push the narrative of why Bitcoiners have been so adamant about people running their own nodes and the cost to run one being low enough that anybody could choose to do it if they want to. Do you think this helps?
Yeah, I think it does give an incentive. Again, as we've talked about before in previous episodes, or you can say podcasts, running a node is one of those things where it's kind of like a stepping stone. And I guess you know better than I do in this, but it's still for the average person to set it up, and like even just setting up a crypto wallet is tough for people. It's not easy. Right. It's not like intuitive. It's setting up a crypto wallet and sending like Bitcoin to a wallet is not like, oh, this is fun. Or setting up a Ledger Nano S, not fun. It's not as sketchy, but it's like it's something completely different than anything else you've ever done. It's not like a wire transfer. It's not like going to the bank. You're sending internet money, from an exchange or from another wallet to like a hardware wallet, a Trezor or a Ledger. And I guess the same can be said for setting up a node, in the sense that I guess if you do get paid for validating the chain, it's still the same thing. You have to move that money, and it's a hassle for a lot of people. I feel like there's people in Bitcoin for the soul of the speculation standpoint that they just like, there's a fixed supply, and over time, I see the value of Bitcoin just rising because people see it as a hard asset, as the gold. We always say Bitcoin is the gold of crypto or whatever. But this whole no miner tax thing is pretty funny. So is Roger Ver the one who's pushing for a miner tax?
Yeah, I want to say he's funding the developer who wrote the proposal for the miner tax, and then you have all of a sudden everybody else trying to push back on this. And it's funny just see the continued split of the community, right, and the splintering of the community. That's one of the reasons why it's so important to not hard fork, because you hard fork once, and then the probability of it's like Lindy, right? Once you do it once, there's a higher probability that you're going to keep forking, and it just keeps splintering and splintering and splintering. Yeah. And now look at you. It can really fuck up your whole game here when you're trying to
vision, man. That's what I believe in.
Do we have anything else to touch on with the? I had one more, one more take that I wanted to hear from you. Just, you made a good point. It's not easy to to run a full node, right? It's more complicated. Even just using a wallet is completely foreign to anybody who's not used Bitcoin before. They're used to fiat money, traditional money. Maybe they use something like Venmo or something like that, or everybody uses credit cards. So it is just a totally different way of thinking about it. But when I think about these technologies progressing and becoming easier, just like it was pretty difficult to get on the internet as the internet was becoming mainstream and going from dial-up, and then people using email protocols like SMTP and trying to send emails without having a nice GUI interface around it that, you and I don't think twice about being able to send an email. It's pretty easy. You need an address, a subject line, and whatever you want to put in it, and you can attach something. It's not super complicated, but it was pretty difficult if you had to write a little script up on your own and then send it. There's no good user experience with that. So I wonder if it won't be, will people end up using a node, but they don't know that they're using it? So in other words, wallets on your phone will just be embedded with a node, either syncing in the background, or, there's other technologies that are coming out where you don't necessarily have to carry the full size of the chain on your device. You don't have to hold 200 gigabytes on your phone. You can, either sync it up and it's kind of deleting the prior block so it doesn't take up a lot of space. I just think that it will be important to make sure people can run a full node if they want to. And I think it's more likely than not that people will end up running them and not actually knowing that they're running one. But I was curious what you thought about that.
So I just remembered this, and this is pretty funny. When I went balls deep into crypto, like in the probably early summer of 2017, like I was working at my internship, and I had a triple monitor set up. Because you're speaking of running nodes, and I just remember this for whatever reason. I don't think I've ever mentioned this to you. At some point, I decided to start syncing a Bitcoin wallet because I was at work, and I just always on the triple monitor setup, and I don't know, I can't remember why I was syncing a Bitcoin node at work, but one of the tech guys came up to me because it was totally as you're talking about. It just takes up so much. I don't know if it was draining internet or something, and I was working at a pretty decent sized company with 100 people, and it was totally fucking up something. Because he mentioned something to me, and I was like, oh yeah, I was totally syncing a wallet, but I didn't think about that in that sense. Syncing a wallet was totally, if you ever done it, it takes a lot of, processing power, and I don't know what it does to the internet, but it definitely does not help your internet capacity.
No, yeah, I mean, it takes up a lot of bandwidth. I mean, I know
Yeah, exactly.
when I was syncing my node, it did take a couple of days, and, every month it uses however much bandwidth, and it's important that people get a good understanding of that, and that newer technologies and implementations and changes to the efficiencies of doing that just become stupid easy. I know there's something called Erlay that's decreases the amount of bandwidth that are necessary on a consistent basis for you to maintain the ledger, right? Because you could be using a couple gigs a month or more downloading, all the latest blocks each and every month. How do you make sure that bandwidth is as small as possible? You don't want to take up that much of a footprint. And you also don't want to, depending upon where you're living, maybe you don't want your internet service provider knowing what you're downloading in that case. So I'm hopeful that these things will start being more run in the background, a lot more non-custodial stuff. A lot of the Lightning wallets these days they're non-custodial, and they use something called Neutrino, which is like a light client where you are doing the validation yourself, but you don't have to use up 200 gigs of storage on your phone just in order to use the wallet. So they're making advances, and just like anything else, people have no clue how email works or the internet works, and nobody has any problem sending an email or getting online. And my guess is, as over the decades to come, Bitcoin will be exactly the same.
Built into the background. Right?
Yeah, it's just built into the background. You don't know. No one's going to understand or have to know that, it's important to keep the chain size small to increase decentralization. And this is why you don't raise the block size and this is why you validate your own transactions. It will just be either understood or nobody's going to give a shit because it's just going to work, right? That's the best technologies are the ones that they look like magic because they just work instantly and you don't have to think about it. So
Yeah.
I have a feeling this is the way we're heading, but it's still fucking early, man. It's only been 11 years and barely anybody's using it.
Remind me, what is the block size again? Bitcoin's at I know in
So
megabytes, right?
it can go over 2 megabytes.
Okay.
So the last couple of blocks that I had seen when I was looking a couple of days ago, there were some that were coming in at 2.2 megs per block, which is the block size was originally set to 1 megabyte, and then they changed something called the block weight limit, which can allow for more transactions and a larger block size. So, but it's like a trade-off because 2 megabytes is 100% larger than 1 megabyte. So, how much total size would you have saved had there been no SegWit and no increase to the block size whatsoever? So it's, again, all this stuff it's all trade-offs. And when people I don't know if you remember this when they were talking about BSV, like gigameg blocks and just like these monster blocks, and the whole thing's ridiculous because there's nothing decentralized about that. That's just the server farms validating transactions. We have that right now. It's called Visa, Venmo, Zelle. We have that already. It doesn't make a difference. So
I was gonna say, like, I remember with the original Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash fork, that was the big deal, was the block size, the arguments, whatever. And there again was a time where I remember, like, being in crypto, and I was well diversified with a few altcoins and some Bitcoin. But I remember thinking about, I was like, oh, I should go all into Bitcoin really quickly right before whenever that split happened, the hard fork. And boy, oh boy, did I fuck up not doing that, because lo and behold, Bitcoin Cash went like up to $4,000 thanks to that final Coinbase pump. That was ridiculous. Yeah.
Fucking insane, dude.
Insanity. Oh man.
All right, what do you think? Should we move on to layer one?
Peter Thiel.
Yeah, so we talked about layer one
Episode 69.
No, the Bcash one was episode 69. This one was actually episode 46. This was a while ago. I think we talked about this when they first did their raise. So, Peter Thiel backed this mining company in West Texas with a goal of putting a tremendous amount of hash rate by 2021. So layer one, they're mining in West Texas. I think they're using wind, other renewables, and they're looking to scale out to 200 megawatts within the next few months. And they're aiming to capture 30% of the total network hash rate by the end of 2021. They also, as we were talking about before, they raised $50 million from Peter Thiel, Shasta Ventures, and others back in November. And I'm pretty sure that's when we were covering this. So it looks like, we're seeing that shift of mining away from China into North America and other jurisdictions that are more friendly to Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining. And I think on one hand, if you are a different jurisdiction or government and you want to see increased tax revenue, you're going to allow Bitcoin mining, especially if you have access to cheap renewable energy, because that's what miners need, right? They need the cheapest possible electricity you can get. And as of right now, outside of dirty coal, the only thing you can use is renewables. So that's wind, hydro, solar in some circumstances, but the upfront cost of solar is a little high. So that makes things a little bit more interesting. Geothermal, all that good stuff.
Is nuclear included in there?
It's not. And there's a lot of speculation around, nuclear is the best option, right? That's the absolute cheapest you can use for energy production, especially when it comes to mining. But you have the negative stigma around nuclear, right? So nuclear, I haven't done my full deep dive into nuclear, but as far as I understand, it's pretty much the cleanest and also one of the safest outside of the black swan type nuclear events like Chernobyl and things like that, that end up being absolutely catastrophic. But other than that, it's the cleanest, cheapest energy you can get. And now you have things on Netflix talking about Chernobyl and everything else, and there's just a whole stigma around nuclear in general.
Well, and it, like, I don't know enough about it, but basically the Russians or the Soviet Union at the time chose the cheaper route for reactors, which exposed them to the issue versus the Western world, whether you're talking Europe or U.S., was building reactors that didn't have that issue because, and it was if you haven't seen the miniseries Chernobyl on HBO, I highly recommend watching it. It does a good job. Like, I had known about Chernobyl before. Thank you, Call of Duty 4. But it basically the Soviet Union chose a cheaper option, which left their reactors, RBMK4, if I remember correctly, exposed to this issue of when they attempted a failsafe, they overheat, and thus explosion, which happened in Chernobyl.
Right. So, I'm pretty bullish on nuclear. I hope that in the decade to come, that stigma starts to go away and other countries end up going that route who aren't subject to, political correctness or whatever else, mainstream media kind of pushing that down their throats. I hope it goes in that direction. Yeah. But yeah, so it looks like, layer one, pretty lofty goal, 30% of the hash rate by 2021. It'll be very interesting to see if they can do that. And I think I'd almost wonder if they are making that estimation based on just the mining outlook as it is today, because or just assume everyone won't increase their hash rate now, because typically we see hash rate increase, especially during bull markets, because that's the whole point. Bitcoin sending a price signal to the economy saying, hey, I'm going up, and people are like, well, it looks like I'm going to start mining because I want to make some Bitcoin here. And it looks like to get started, they're using third-party rigs. So my guess is they're using Bitmain S9s to get started, since those are pretty cheap. I mean, you can even find them on eBay for, maybe under $100 or $200 for the rig and the power supply, which is pretty good. I mean, they're not as efficient as some of the newer rigs that have come out, but the newer rigs are just so expensive that the payback period's way too long. So they're not going to do that. One of the interesting things that Layer 1 is doing is they're using some liquid cooling technology, because, I've never really been to West Texas, but I'm assuming it's hot and humid as fuck. So how do you keep temperatures down, right? So they're going to go with their liquid cooling stuff to keep temps down, and that's good. Somebody's going to need to bear the cost of all the R&D to figure out liquid cooling and how to make that work. So then, that technology will keep getting better and better. So I think that's important to see. But, when you see this kind of stuff, what do you think? Do you see a continued shift into more decentralized mining and mining popping up in other parts of the country, and especially in the USA?
Well, I was going to say I see a shift to centralized when they say trying to go for 30% of the hash rate by end of 2021. I think I discussed this before. If they're going for 30% by end of 2021, where are they going to try to be by 2023 or 2025? I mean, if that's what they're going for, in a less than 2-year period, where are they going to be in 5 years? Are they trying to go? I mean, as I was theoretically saying, they could, with Peter Thiel's backing, because he's got plenty of money, could theoretically take over the hash rate, which obviously is a bad thing. From my perspective, and maybe I'm wrong about that. It is a good thing that there's less mining in China, because obviously that's not good because of the whole coronavirus thing going on there now. But I don't know how much percent is in China. Do you know how much of the hash rate's in China? It's a lot, I know.
Yeah, I would assume it's more than 50%. That wouldn't shock me. And that was a good kind of counterpoint you made, that they're shooting for a pretty lofty goal. Does that not centralize it more? And I think on one hand it's a good thing, more mining coming outside of China. You don't want a totalitarian regime to be able to point the guns at somebody and say, hey, we're gonna change these parameters in Bitcoin and fuck everybody over, or at least make the attempt to. But on the other hand, you have to look at Layer 1 as good Bitcoiners. And there's a quote right on the screen that you have here, where he says, Bitcoin mining is a winner takes most industry. Getting to 30% means we will be able to guarantee stability and security for vastly longer periods than was previously possible. This is a significant boost for the network. So what he's trying to say there is that you're going to have another good actor coming into the space. So, look at it as being good for Bitcoin. Now, as we always say in Bitcoin, don't trust, verify. So while it's all nice and good that they want to take up to 30% or they're going to shoot for that or have a lofty goal, you do want to make sure that you think these are better actors in the space. And the other thing to talk about, the centralization, and I don't know that I think we might have covered this in another episode. I can't remember. There is a new proposal for a mining protocol where, right now there's just mining pools, right? So you have Ant Pool or whatever that Bitmain runs. You're going to have you have Slush Pool those are the Trezor guys, and Slush, they're really good. So basically, any hobbyist miner, anybody that's mining in another place, they just point their hash rate to a pool because that's the cheapest way to earn Bitcoin, right? You're not going to try to run your own pool and, cross your fingers and hope you're going to mine a block. You might be mining for weeks, months, or even years and never find a block. Whereas if you're pointing it to a pool, you're going to get X percentage payout of hash rate that you're contributing to the pool. Now, the new proposal that's coming out is basically saying that the mining pool itself won't be able to essentially censor transactions. So the any hobbyist miners, if you're mining in your garage and you're still contributing to a pool, you have the choice to decide which transactions you want to put inside the block. You don't have to rely on the pool. And that's where the pool centralization gets more scary, because they can just say, all right, we're gonna not mine any of these transactions, or we're going to censor these ones. And if you're contributing hash rate to the pool, you can't do anything about that. So this next proposal kind of flips that around, where the pool's operators essentially have no say in which transactions end up getting mined. So again, that's like just maybe a little too technical for the kind of stuff that we talk about, but it's an important enough nuance where you get less concerned about mining centralization over time.
That's way above my head, but
yeah.
I was gonna say, because I was reading through this a little bit here, and it was mentioning like Korea-based Samsung foundry, and since the coronavirus is now really breaking out in Korea, and obviously China, you got to wonder how many of these chip makers, like either one or two things, like ASICs are going to be impossible to buy cheaply very shortly, if not already, including every other chip, because these countries can't make them now because they're under quarantine and whatnot. I know this is a little off topic, but still, you got to wonder, if this year it's going to be very hard to get your hands on mining equipment because of that.
No, yeah, that's a good point. I think we did see a little dip in the hash rate just over the last week or two, and the speculation is, okay, well, where did the hash rate come off from? Did it fall off from maybe Chinese mining, and where they yeah, it's hard to see on these. Yeah, you can see we're kind of flatlined a little bit there. Yeah, you can see it flatten out there for the last 2 weeks or so, but it's been typically in an upward trajectory here. So, was there a farm somewhere in a province near Wuhan that had to, no workers are coming in, we gotta shut down. There's nothing you can do. Well, to be honest with you, shit happens, and that's to be expected. Another reason why you'd want to see hash rate more and more decentralized. But it's true, the supply chain issue with any type of pandemic event. You might be layer one and you're expecting all of these 10 nanometer chips to show up to your door in the summer so you can get cooking on your new mining hardware, and then all of a sudden they're delayed by a month or 2 months or 3 months, and then what? So it'll be interesting to see what the hash rate looks like kind of as this progresses over the year, and to see if it does slow down the hash rate at all. Either way, I'm not overly concerned about the hash rate. I think there's a ton of fucking money getting pumped into mining right now, but
I wonder if they have if this West Texas, I wonder if they have their hands on the ASICs yet. Because if you don't, that's a bad issue.
Yeah. I think that they do, and they are up and running, but that's the question. If you were expecting a couple more containers full of ASICs and they're delayed, or you need to sanitize them or something like that before you start, it's just
let them sit in the sun for a few weeks.
Well, no, yeah, it's a good point.
I guess.
Yeah, you'd want to cook them up a little bit, make sure they're disinfected. But even little stuff like that, slowing something progress down by a couple of weeks has just implications that are difficult to
reverberate.
see. Yeah, like they're difficult to see, and you can only kind of look at them in hindsight.
Exactly.
So, yeah, this will be something to keep our eye on. I'm really glad to see more mining coming to the USA. I really hope that it becomes a big industry for the USA because it could definitely have some well-paying fucking jobs into the future. That's for sure.
We got to get the Trump administration behind pumping American Bitcoin mining.
Yeah, man.
Fuck the coal mines,
Make
man.
make mining great again. Yeah, why not?
Oh, God.
Uh,
Yeah, so I smoothed it out to 7-day average here, and you can see at the beginning of February,
mhm.
it definitely dipped down quite a bit. So
Yeah.
it's
No,
it's
that
coming
makes sense.
back, but so some food for thought. Do we want to jump into this crypto debit card that I will not be able to use because I am an American citizen?
Yeah, definitely. So it looks like, as we said before, Bitcoin debit cards are back in the news again, and Visa has finally granted Coinbase power to not only have their own Bitcoin and cryptocurrency debit cards, but also to issue Bitcoin debit cards, and that's called the principal membership. It's different than just having your own credit card or debit card rather, because not everybody uses Coinbase. But if you are the now supplier of debit cards, this makes, I don't know. We've talked about the 10x shitcoin that came out in 2017, and the whole point was being able to have a credit card or debit card where you could spend your cryptocurrencies, and that didn't go anywhere. And now that Coinbase can kind of issue those, like all you would have had to do is go to them and say, hey, I want to issue credit cards to my customers, and boom, that it's done. So I don't think you're going to see any more token backed shitcoin credit cards or debit cards or anything like that.
Shout out Julian Haas.
Yeah, Julian Haas, that fucking guy. But I was also wanted to point out for Coinbase specifically, this is a revenue driver for them. So not only will they be able to have their own debit cards, but they're going to be able to issue those, which will bring in fee revenue. And there's speculation that last year for 2019, Coinbase saw an estimated 40% decline in earnings, which is, that's staggering, right?
Yeah.
That's the cyclicality of Bitcoin and this industry makes it very difficult to be a business that is trying to operate 24/7, because as we said before, bear markets are a bitch, and all of a sudden nobody gives a crap about Bitcoin or exchanges or trading or all of this stuff, because people are pissed. They lost all their money. There's just no demand for this kind of stuff anymore. So a 40% decline in earnings will all of a sudden make Coinbase or other companies think twice about, well, maybe we should list some more coins and get those listing fees. Like, I wonder how many listing fees, how much money Binance has made over the last however many years just on all these listing fees. But
So much, dude. Do you remember the
yeah.
listing fees were getting ridiculous? Like they're charging like certain ICOs and altcoins, whatever, mainly ICOs, like a few million. It was ridiculous. Like easily, $1 to $2, maybe $3 million, and if you have 20 ICOs, give you $3 million each. So there's 60 million free money.
Yeah, it's insane. And that's the problem with working in the industry or being in the industry full time, is you are so susceptible to the cyclicality of the industry, and it makes it really, really difficult.
And did
You all right?
yeah, no, I was gonna say, didn't Coinbase lay off some people last year?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure we covered that. They did have some layoffs in a few offices, and that's the nature of the beast, right? You're going to see these ebbs and flows, and that's one of the reasons why I am still hesitant to try to look for a job in this industry full time, because you just never know if you're going to be on the chopping block. All it takes is one really bad bear market, and they're like, yeah, man, sorry, we can't afford to pay you anymore, especially if you're not some sort of like maybe software engineer or exchange architect or whatever else. There's just it's very risky. I guess the other thing to note about this one is it's only available in the EU. So if you're looking to think you're going to start spending your cryptocurrencies with your debit card or spend your Bitcoin on a debit card. Yeah, not available in the USA. EU residents only at this point, because they are not subject to the same types of capital gains taxes. When it comes to cryptocurrencies, they can kind of spend at will. I don't know that there is a limit actually for spending, so they don't really give a shit. But not the case in the U.S. And I know that we talked about this maybe last week or the week before about the having a de minimis law where you can spend a couple of $100 worth and you don't have to file that, right? It's just it would be too much of a hassle.
Well, Larry Kudlow and the Trump administration Larry Kudlow was on CNBC talking about how they're gonna, households under $200,000 income per year, $10,000, tax free for investing in stocks. So it's like, why not implement that in crypto? Like, it would definitely increase the adoption of Bitcoin and the rest of the cryptoverse if you're allowed to spend it. If you're able to spend your Bitcoin and not be charged, oh, I bought this Bitcoin 6 months ago, but if I'm going to go buy something, now I'm going to get charged 40% because it's a short-term capital gain. That's insane. That is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it's what makes crypto a nightmare. It's like, so what, because like, as you and I know, it's like if you move Bitcoin around, you buy an exchange, and then, if you buy something else, or if you just stay with Bitcoin, it doesn't even matter. You're still buying it. Is that, counts as a trade? Does that have to, it's.
Yeah. In 2017, crypto to crypto could be counted as like a 1031
Everyone
exchange.
Making hundreds of exchanges. It's a nightmare.
Yeah, the problem is after that in 2018 and going forward, like crypto to crypto transactions, it is what it is. And the accounting is just a nightmare. And I think that in and of itself slowed down, like that brought the bear market really to a halt during 2018. People were like, oh shit, like I didn't even think about all the tax implications and blah, blah, blah. And then you just kind of push it to the side and try not to think about it. But with this kind of stuff, on one hand, like I personally don't care. Like I don't need to spend right now, so it doesn't matter to me. But if I were in a circumstance where you were living on Bitcoin or something like that was how you made your money. If you're in the U.S. or a U.S. citizen, it's just what a fucking nightmare. It's just a complete mess.
It's a Charlie Foxtrot, a.k.a. clusterfuck.
Yeah. I'm hopeful that, if this kind of stuff ends up, if there's demand for this and people want to do this, that's a good thing, because all it's going to do, it's going to push back this way into the U.S. and people are going to demand that. They're going to say everybody else on the planet is able to spend freely. And if you're in a circumstance where you need spending to increase and you have a ton of bag holders who wouldn't mind buying a new big screen TV with some of their gains and they don't have to worry about the tax implications, you better think twice about whether or not you're going to have a de minimis rule or not, and you might want to think about upping it so people can kind of spend freely and get that economy going in an off chance scenario that all of a sudden the tax implications work negatively for the government, right? Because they want to increase that tax revenue. They want to increase GDP. Just, let them spend. I think it'll come. It's not going to come in 2020. I doubt it's going to come in 2021, but a lot of these things, I feel like the rules end up changing during bear markets after, bull markets come and there's excitement and all of a sudden everyone's like, all right, maybe we should take this seriously. And then it takes however long to, get rules and regulations changed and passed. So my guess is in a couple of years, you'll see it. But I also don't think if you're spending a couple bucks worth, are you really a target for
the IRS
auditing or so, I bought, I was at a Bitcoin conference and I bought a t-shirt for $15 and, who knows, you might even have a capital loss in that case, in which case you'd be getting refund, right? So, do you really want to waste your time and resources doing that? There's plenty of other ways to make a lot more money if you're the IRS by auditing other individuals outside of this. So I'm not overly concerned about it, but I do hope that the demand for debit cards, what do you think? Do you think this will end up moving the needle at some point?
I think, I wish our government, because I'm an American citizen, would be more open to internet money, because it is, it definitely is part of the future, and it would make transactions a lot easier. As you and I talk about, like, we can move our Bitcoin around on the weekend. You can move crypto at all times, and that's what the beauty of it. And, even though it's, crypto is shit coins, My point is that it's internet money at the end of the day, and you're able to send it from point A to point B, and there's no, bank saying, oh, it's, Saturday night and it's 10:12 p.m. You can't send it. Uh, and it's, and then also the fees too. Like when you think about if you send a same day wire, it's $30.
Yeah.
And I don't know, if when you're talking millions and millions of dollars, I'm sure there's even larger fees. But I do know international, which I've only done a handful of times. It's like fuck that. Like when you talk about transferring money across a border, unless you're doing it into cash in a bag, if you're driving or flying across a border, good luck. So
Yeah, it's just a lot of work, and I think that's a really underappreciated comment. When you're trying to deal with banking stuff over the weekend and you realize you can't, and then you send Bitcoin to an exchange on a Saturday morning when all the banks are closed, you're like, this is just unbelievable that we can't do something like this then. And I mean, I remember the first time I did it, and it was the most powerful thing ever. Like you just felt like fucking Superman, or you felt like Bradley Cooper in Limitless, just like, oh my God, this is insane. I can't believe I can send money on a weekend. It sounds so stupid when you sit back and think about it, but people have been not been able to send money on weekends for a very long period of time. So being able to do that is just so gratifying.
Yeah, no, it's a game changer. Kind of like that vegan documentary.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, it is a game changer, and it's such a silly and obvious example, but it makes a humongous difference. There's been times when things needed to literally get done on the weekend to maintain solvency, and you can't get money into a bank to make sure that a business remains solvent. I mean, it's just mind-blowing stuff where you're like, I can't believe I actually can't do this. And you're dealing with the wire system and all that stuff. And it's a mess. It's time for an upgrade. I think the upgrade is coming. It's going to take way longer than we think. And we had mentioned this before we started recording. And I was like, number just needs to go up way higher.
Number needs to go higher.
Number needs to go up way higher for any of this stuff to even matter, because nobody cares about an asset that is even, what are we at, $150 billion market cap? Yeah, sure. I mean, that's not small, but when you're talking about all of the market cap for other various assets, deep into the trillions, gold, call it 9-10 trillion, equities, 50 trillion, real estate, 200 trillion.
Perfect example is Apple is larger than the whole, like 5 times the size of the whole crypto market cap. And it's like probably 10 to 12 times the size of Bitcoin's market, or probably 10 times the size of Bitcoin's market cap right now. And then when you talk about the MAGA stocks, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Apple, they're over 4 trillion combined. Those stocks, and they're obviously way above any valuation that means anything, because besides for the Japanese stock market and the U.S. stock market, they're larger than the whole of the German stock market. They're larger than everything, dude. It's ridiculous. But my point is, as you said, until number goes higher, until this becomes some absurd number, until crypto becomes like $1 trillion market cap or something like that, will we see more, activity in that space? Until then, crypto being at, Bitcoin being at fucking 10K doesn't really matter. So.
Yeah, right. It doesn't matter. Number needs to go up. I'd say you're right. It needs to definitely go over $1 trillion market cap, and I think that's around 58,000 per Bitcoin would be $1 trillion market cap, and that's when other people might start to get interested. More of your financial advisors, other hedge funds are like, oh, okay, maybe there is something to this. But it really does need to start knocking on gold's door before anybody starts to give a shit about it. And that could take way longer than people think. I think it's sooner than people think, but it is going to take time. But number go up incentivizes all kinds of different things. So if number's going up and you're a lawyer who a tax law lawyer, and you're like, all right, I'm going to help these fucking Bitcoin people. They're going to fund me to come up with laws to then push lobbyists to get changes in de minimis tax law. But it only happens if number go up high enough. There needs to be like the market needs to send a price signal to other people to say, I want to make money, so I'm going to go and do that. But it's still too small for that to really make too much of a difference. But obviously I'm bullish, or I wouldn't be recording a fucking Bitcoin podcast. So
Obviously,
all
I'm
this,
fucking bullish.
it just as we always say, this stuff takes way longer than you think. We were talking about a recession a year and
I mean, the world
15 months ago.
We weren't wrong in the sense the world was ending in December 2018.
Right.
It was. I mean, Steve Mnuchin had meet with the heads of like Morgan Stanley, with J.P. Morgan, Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, on like Christmas Eve, because literally the stock market was just going to zero. Not that it was going to actually zero, but I mean we had dropped 20% in the span of basically the fourth quarter, and then what happened was complete switch in policy. No more cutting, no more raising rates, and then I think we paused quantitative tightening at that point, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and that's when it started.
Or maybe I think quantitative tightening still was happening, but the whole Fed, we're not raising rates anymore, was a big deal. And then on top of that, the People's Bank of China threw $1 trillion of liquidity at the markets. But last episode, as Steve Leisman said to to Fed chairman, I think he was former James Bullard or whatever. He's like, so how does cutting rates stop the flu? And Bullard was just left speechless, because it's the truth. You can cut rates and throw as much quantitative easing as you want at this market, but when countries like South Korea and China aren't, producing, that's a big issue.
Right.
Simple.
Yeah. You can only quantitatively ease so much, or do not QE, as they always say.
Not QE.
But it doesn't really make a difference. You can only paper over something so much before issues start to happen, and it's fine. It seems like more and more people are now starting to see it coming, and there's nothing you can do but just wait. You just kind of have to wait, play defense, figure out what you're going to do. What are the worst case scenarios for you? What does your portfolio look like to make sense? There's just so much to think about with this kind of stuff. And then I wouldn't care about any of this stuff if it weren't for Bitcoin. And that's where I think it becomes so interesting, because now you're seeing the other macro guys like Raul I don't think we talked about this last week. Somebody asked him, if you could hold any single asset for the next 10 years, what would it be? He said Bitcoin. This is somebody who dumped his Bitcoin bags at 2000 in 2017 because he was like, I'm out. Like, I don't want to deal with this. This is the top. And now if you had to give the guy a choice, he'd go with Bitcoin for a 10-year hold over any other asset. So, and I've sent you the posts from like DTAP Capital, and he's just super bullish on it. And it's just so interesting watching these global, macro guys are taking a step back and objectively looking at their surroundings, and Bitcoin's interesting to them now. And it wasn't in the past.
Dave Collin, I'm pretty sure, finally bought Bitcoin.
Yeah. I think so. At least he was on Marty Bent's podcast. If you haven't listened to that, go check it out.
That was good.
Yeah, he's good. I like him because he's objective about it. He's a good libertarian type. He
no bullshit, no nonsense. Like he just gets to the point.
He does not fuck around. I actually give him a lot of credit because he says some really wacky stuff where I'm like, man, don't get me wrong, I agree with you, but I wouldn't say that on Twitter.
I would say it in public.
Yeah, he doesn't care, and that's what I really like about
that. I'm pretty sure during that, was it that podcast, or was he like pissing in a cup or something, or he had something going wrong? Was that the episode?
I can't remember. I'm
pretty sure the Marty Bent podcast, he had something going wrong with down below, and he's like, "Yep, wait, I gotta go pee." Pee in a cup, like sitting where he's recording the podcast. Like, he's a wacky dude, but I love him. And I was just saying, I looked up this Fed repo operations. I typed into Google, and like, here's the insanity. And like, I like to talk about this because it's the perfect. We have this whole Democratic caucus going on in the U.S., and I haven't heard them once talk about what's going on with the Federal Reserve, what's going on with repo operations, quantitative, not QE. And here's Wall Street Journal from January 28th. Fed adds $84.7 billion in new money to markets. And it's like Fed implemented $55.7 billion overnight repurchase agreement, or repo operation, and $28.95 billion to 14-day repo operation. I mean, that's a huge fucking number, but it's like nothing to us anymore because they're just doing it all the time. And it's like, sure, it's being reported in the Wall Street Journal, but like, and I guess it's mainstream news, but like, we aren't hearing it. As I said, like, why isn't this a topic in the Democratic debates? And the reason it is because those people all want free money too. And It's an issue, like, I don't care what side of the political spectrum you're on, as far left or as far right, you can't just keep spending money like this. At some point, it's going to matter, and it's going to come back and bite us in the ass. It's just that simple.
Right, and that's where we mentioned this last episode. When does inflation start creeping back in and coming back into, your consumer goods and the price of your steaks? And, you and I have talked about the price of haircuts going up and steaks going up and all this other stuff. But if you see more 1971 or the inflation in the 70s creep back in, that's where the holders of the money bear the expense of all of this money printing stuff, which what are you going to do? Because, these people are trying to get reelected and do other things. You can't cut from other places. You can just inflate the money supply, and then everybody bears the cost at the same time through inflationary prices. That's how you manage your debt issues. And it's a real shame, but that's why people start looking to other things like Bitcoin, like gold. That's why real estate prices are so high. People are just letting them sit vacant in San Francisco, New York, Shanghai, London, Paris, because what else are you going to do? You're going to park $1 million somewhere, and real estate, they're, of course, what's the saying? They're not making any more of it but you can always build up. So, your people are pushing other assets into this store of value function where they might not necessarily have been there had the money just been good, right? And have you just had a good sound money, you wouldn't have some of these issues. And it is fascinating to see it play out in real time.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it's like, I couldn't imagine being like, I remember somebody on Twitter posting about him when he was a kid in the 70s. I think he was talking about like his favorite candy bar went from like 5 cents to 20 cents. And to us nowadays, oh, that's not a big deal, 15 cents. But that just jumped 300%.
Right.
Like, woof. And to a kid who may have, an allowance of $1 a week or, a job, where he sells little trinkets and makes $3 a week, that's a big jump. That's a big percentage of his income just got taken away. And, I probably should talk to my grandpa about this because he was, more middle-aged then about, and I don't know if he had owned his business at that point, but like what, I couldn't imagine in terms of oil costs or anything. I don't think he owned his business at that point, but still, in terms of what he was working, like that had to affect everything. But there's no way delinking the U.S. dollar from gold didn't affect everything in the business world.
Right. I mean, just the prices skyrocketing, and it sounds stupid when you think 5 cents to 20 cents on an absolute value, 15 cents. Okay, what's the big deal? But on a percentage basis, it's gigantic. And a dollar used to be worth a lot more back in the day. The purchasing power was just so much more. And it's really a shame to see that play out, and just the ripple effects of inflation and unsound, easy money has on, the economies in the world. It's really just a terrible sight to see. But that's why I'm so excited for going back to a sound money standard and heading in that direction will be, I'm all for it. So
yeah, it's time for sound money in our lives again.
Yeah, it is.
It would change everything.
It would absolutely change everything. And I think that's the reason why I'm not like so depressed about anything anymore. Like Jesse Colombo is just like, dude, living life on the edge.
He's a top signal, dude. He like disappeared for a few months and then just came back out of nowhere like late January, early February. And I'm not saying he was like bitching and moaning, but he was bitching and moaning on Twitter. And I like him a lot. I like Jesse Colombo. I love a lot of his stuff. I get it. And I get why he's pissed, because you got a bunch of bulls who have just been riding the longest bull market ever and have made a fuck ton of money. And his whole thesis just keeps getting destroyed by central banks. But he's going to be right, like, very shortly. And I'm pretty sure he's right now. I'm pretty sure when he's went full prepper mode and just buying, like, MREs and talking about buying guns and ammo, I'm pretty sure it's a pretty good sign that we're there.
Yeah, no.
He's lost all hope.
Yeah, it's I like Jesse a lot. He's written a lot of great things. I think he nails it pretty much on everything he has to say. He really does nail it. He's a good libertarian type Austrian economist. He totally gets it. I do feel bad for him.
I do too, dude. I feel terrible.
He was calling the top and then just had to watch the markets just rip up. And
yeah,
I guess I was the same. I'm like, fuck, man, I can't believe it's
it's
happening.
About December 2018, he was probably more excited than anyone. He's like, it's happening. And then what happens is the S&P goes up 40% over the next year, or over the next 13 months, just face melts everyone. beyond belief.
Yeah, it's insane.
I mean, think about all this. Stocks went ridiculous. Roku went from like $20 a share to like 170. Looking at Shopify going from like 100 to 500 or whatever it was, 400. Some ridiculous numbers. I mean, we were saying, Apple going from whatever it was, like 150 to 300, or it might have been less than. It might have got down to 130. Got down low, and over doubled. But I think his time has come, and I think a lot of the people that have been mocking him, because I see it on Twitter all the time. You see these people who are the heavily long side investors who believe in the Fed. They love mocking perma bears, and I get it. People have been perma bears for a long time and been wrong. There's no way around it.
Right.
And at the end of the day, I always, every market is manipulated. Once you accept that, that's just a reality you have to accept. Whether you're talking about Bitcoin and crypto, whether you're talking about gold and silver, whether you're talking about equities, they're all manipulated. That's just a reality. And whether you're an investor or a trader, at the end of the day, everyone's a trader. So just accept that fact and know that.
Right. No, I think that's well put. There's risk to everything. It's all speculation, because if you knew that the price of something was going up, you wouldn't be speculating. But you don't know, because nobody can predict the future. You can only assess and take as much information in as you possibly can, and then try to make decisions after the fact. There's nothing else you can do about it. But
good way to wrap that guy up there.
Yeah, this is a good way to wrap it up. This was episode 73. Make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube. Yeah, what do people say? Smash that like button, subscribe, whatever. Leave us a comment. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts if you can. 5 stars would be great. It does help us climb the rankings and help spread this podcast. Make sure to share this with anyone that you think might enjoy it. We do appreciate it, and be careful out there. Stack some sats. Peace.
Peace.